So hello and welcome once again to Cherry TV. I'm Iain McNay and today my guest is Hazel O'Connor. Hi Hazel.
Hello.
And Hazel's been very active over her career. She's done many different things. Obviously she's best known for Breaking Glass, the film that came out many moons ago now. She's also recorded 15 albums. I have a couple here. Cover Plus, which has just been reissued. And Here She Comes, which is a fairly new album that came out about 2 or 3 years ago. She's had an incredible life, a very kind of dramatic life at times. And we're going to have to squeeze it into the programme because there's so much to talk about. So Hazel, I wanted to have like a depth in this interview. It's not to be just then this happened and that happened. And there's one thing that I picked up from the book, which I should mention as well, which is your autobiography, which has been out for a time now, which is really, again, a really good read. And it's when you were very young, what you used to do was you used to go out in the estate where you lived, get yourself lost because you wanted to be able to find yourself home again. I think you're only 5 or 6 years old then. And that kind of typified your life, I think, didn't it?
Pretty bizarre behaviour, isn't it? Possibly locked me up for that. No, I think I just wanted to... Yeah, I've got a head like this. I work in mapping in my head. It's the same as when I'm on tour. When I drive somewhere, I see it in my head already where we're going. And I think that's the same thing as what I used to do when I was a kid. I wanted to map where I was going. And I think it's the same as living life. I map it. Sometimes it's not very healthy. It's a bit OCD, possibly.
But you took the risk at that very young age of kind of getting lost and not finding home just to develop your mapping, basically.
Yeah. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Yeah.
And also, again, it talks about in the book your childhood, and you had periods where you were kind of very depressed and would burst out crying at school, and so it wasn't a smooth ride, was it?
Yeah, but I think that was puberty really kicked in, and puberty affected me quite strangely because I didn't have a father living with me anymore. I loved my dad big time. I was a daddy's girl. And when they split up, I was about 8. So when I hit my early teenage years, I had my first kind of big love. And it was disappointing, really. Disappointing, yeah. And it freaked me out and I got freaked out. And then I started this behaviour of getting upset about things. But luckily I had a great school teacher called Miss Bates, who was not a very beautiful looking woman at all. And we used to call her the witch, actually. And she walked like Spotty Dog in the wooden tops. And she had these little kitten heels. She had a big nose and a jutty chin. And she took me aside one time at school and she said, Hazel, look, you've got a lot of advantages and you're missing it all at the moment. You're popular, you're athletic, you're happy, have been a happy child or young girl, and now I see you doing all this stuff, and it's okay, you can cry for a bit and all your friends will go, ooh, you know, what's the matter, da da da, and then one day you'll become boring. And then you'll realise nobody will come and pat you and love you and do that. And I just took it on board because she told me some of her life story, which was horrific. She'd had a terrible upbringing, much worse than my own sort of little sadnesses. And I stopped. I just stopped it. I thought, she's right. I can't behave like...
And you were able to stop, okay?
Yeah, well, you know, over a period of time. I mean, I used to have to go and see a psychologist, Miss Woolard. But I never told her really what... I didn't tell her what I think she wanted to know. And I couldn't because I was a teenager. Yeah. And I'm thinking, just get off of my case. I'm not telling you anything, woman. You know, especially because you're sitting there with a benign smile going, yes, yes. No. But Miss Bates really sorted me out. Yeah. It was like, you know, cop on, girl. This is real life. And if you live your life like that, you will always be unhappy. You have
be a victim.
Yes, yeah. And I've spent a long time in my life being a victim. You know, I've fought against it, and I probably do or have in the past gone around with like a V on my forehead. But I don't want to be that way.
And at 16, you went to Morocco, which is incredibly brave.
No, I didn't go. I wasn't that brave. I went with my friend's
Yeah, but
sister.
it was still a big thing in those days to go and travel as a fairly young. Now people have gap years and
Yeah. Well, it was we were chaperoned. Her sister was older than us, but we got fed up with being with the sister. She was an anthropologist and she had friends in Casablanca. So me and my best friend went with her to Casablanca, got bored, and I said, let's go to Marrakesh on our own. So we got a train, went to Marrakesh, and when I was in Marrakesh, I was raped. My friend had got an illness. That's why she wasn't even where I was when I was raped. Otherwise, probably the rape wouldn't have happened. But as a consequence, it flipped me out so much. I obviously wanted to get out of Marrakesh, like the wind. We went back to her sister in Casablanca, but I didn't want to stay with them anymore. And I hitchhiked then up to Spain, where my boyfriend was, and went to Ibiza, which sounds a bit mad, but it wasn't mad. It was a reaction, and I wasn't right in the head by then, and I certainly wasn't right emotionally, and I had an awful lot of more horrible adventures, hitchhiking on my own up to blooming Ibiza, stupid, but I reactive person, and when I got back to school, after the summer holidays were over, I just didn't feel the same. I didn't feel like the 15, 16-year-old that had done her O-levels, gone on holiday with her friend's sister, playing hockey at school in my navy blue knickers. It wasn't me anymore. I just thought, I've lived through something really weird and I don't want to be part of this schoolgirl trip. So I got myself into art college.
And that was your passion before music, wasn't it? It was art.
Yeah.
It was art and fashion before.
Yeah, I was never really a musician at all. It was my brother that was a musician, but I used to sing a lot with him because it made me happy. And that was something that has always resonated in my life, the happiness that singing brings. But I used to love just drawing. I found all my old drawings, and they would be things like Miss Snooty or Miss Fashionable. I have this little book still, and it's all these little pictures while we're watching Coronation Street. I'd be writing like these people, these characters, these frocks, these Mary Quant type things. But my mum, you see, was a hairdresser, and she had a hairdressing salon, and some of her staff were very modern. They were mods, and the guys used to wear eye makeup. So I saw all that. I was exposed to wonderful things since I was about 11, really, through the hairdressing trade. And I was also a hairdressing girl, shampooist.
And then you went to live in Amsterdam for a time.
Well, yes, because I got into art college, hated art college. I liked it, but I hated it because I wasn't really equipped for it mentally or emotionally. And it seemed to me that all the girls in my year were 2 years older than me, because most kids go to college when they're 18, and I was doing a pre-degree course a year earlier, and I was doing my A-levels at college and doing the same course as them, and I wasn't equipped really. And all the people that were sleeping with the tutors got on really well, and I used to think that's terrible, because I was still thinking about them as school teachers, Mr. So-and-so and Miss So-and-so, whereas we're now in the grown-up world in college, and I didn't understand some of the big words they used, and I did some artwork there, which, funnily enough, has ended up on the the forecourt of my first art college. Was Hazel O'Connor, but when I left, my name was Muck, because I just took off, and I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I decided I'm going to go to Amsterdam, be a hippie on Dam Square. That's all I had. I just had this picture. This is where I'm going, and the reality was a bit different. Well, not much different, actually.
You had this free spirit, didn't you? That's the important thing. You were following the adventures wherever it took you.
Yeah, but it's a little dangerous sometimes. I did find myself in fairly strange and dangerous positions, but I tended to get out of them, which is, lucky.
But didn't you get raped again in Amsterdam?
I did, and and that was really sad, because I spent a lot of time, as all hippies did in those days, going to the Hare Krishna temple every Sunday because you got fed for free and you sang Hare Krishna, and it was a great day, you know, it was like a party. And one of those Hare Krishna lads wearing saffron used to come to our squat because I lived in they called them cracked houses, and not a crack house where people smoke crack. It didn't exist in those days. A cracked house in Dutch was a squat. So I had a little room in a cracked house called the Factory, and it was quite a militant one, where you had a leader of the house and you had to go and ask, can I make a room out of this place? And yes, I could. And there used to be this Hare Krishna priest that came in and give sweets out to everyone, which is part of the Hare Krishna way. By giving prasadam, you're giving spiritualised food. But he was a little bit obviously weird, and he hopped on top of me one day and stuck his willy in my mouth. You know, I'm making light of it. Of course it wasn't light, it was a total freak out for me. And the fact that I didn't bite his willy off, I hate myself for, or kick him in the buttocks or something. But these are things that people who've been raped think about afterwards. You know, you're so cross with yourself.
You freeze at the time, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. You just think, you don't think. You're going, oh my God, you're afraid. And then it's only afterwards you're angry with yourself that you didn't do all these things. And I've spent all my life going, I should have done this, I should have done that. But I didn't. And what I did do was never go back to the temple again, which is sad. I mean, I did years later, but that comes in later in the story.
But, you know, there's something that kept you going, because then you ended up as a go-go dancer in Tokyo, which again is a huge thing to do. You're still a teenager, you've had bad experiences in life, but there's something still driving you. I want more experience.
Did I want more experience? No, I actually didn't. I was in love with who I think was the love of my life.
This is Adrian, who you talk about in the book, yeah.
And but it was Adrian kept getting on my case about not earning my own living, and then he started really jabbing me about being a hippie and how I'd lived off men in my life, and hadn't contributed to society in any way, and certainly not contributed to our household. So I took the ump, and I saw an advert in Stage magazine which said showgirls and go-go dancers for Japan, and it happened to have equity contracts, which equity contract means you can actually then become an actress in a movie. So it sort of fitted in, and I got that job. I wasn't a great dancer. I was the one that went left when everybody else was going right, but I learned, you know.
Yeah, I think you underplay yourself. I just think you've got tremendous guts doing these things, but.
No, but it wasn't because I didn't want to go. I wanted to go home and say I've got a job, by the way, Adrian, and
so
then.
You were proving to him you could be independent.
Yes, I wanted him to turn around and say don't go, but he didn't. Yeah. So I had to go. Yeah.
And then, what kind of triggered your interest in music?
Okay, well, it was when Adrian and I finally came to an end, and we did have many adventures because it got me going to Beirut, civil war I was in the middle of, got back to being with him, and somehow it was tarnished, our relationship, and it came to a conclusion. And after that, I didn't know what I wanted to do, because my raison d'être had been him since I was 19, and now I'm 21, and I didn't know. I honestly didn't know what I wanted, but I did know that something weird was happening called punk, that my brother was involved in this revolution, that when I read all the music papers, there was all these crazy acts going on, like Sex Pistols and The Clash and Stranglers and Buzzcocks, and then I saw my brother was supporting the Buzzcocks, so I went to see him.
He was in a band called The Flies.
Yes, Neil was in a band called The Flies, and I just loved it. I loved what was happening, and I thought, I'd missed all this because I've been in love with Adrian, and I've been over, dancing away in Beirut or Japan or crossing the Sahara Desert, but this is happening in England, and it's now, and I got really involved as a punter. I went to gigs all the time. To the 100 Club, to the Marquee, to the Roxy, to a gig that Sex Pistols did at, I can't remember its name, college, west of London, which was amazing, because people were jumping off of the blooming speakers. Oh, Sham 69 was the best one that I remember, though, because I'd go on my own, but I remember Sham were playing, and I thought they were great. The minute they started to sing, everybody's jumping up and down, and I'm on a stool because I can't see, and then I fell off the stool, and as I fell off the stool, I leant down and I thought I'd grabbed something, and I grabbed this man's willy by mistake. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And it was just a time of excitement and happiness. And yeah, and it wasn't anything that like the press had written about, you know, that everybody's sort of do me in black. And it just wasn't like that. I didn't find it like that anyway. So I said to my brother, how did you get that record deal? What do you do? And he said, you've got to write songs. And I said, how do you do that? Show me. And he showed me.
And what did he say that was so helpful?
He said to me that if you have people that you like, different artists, study how they write a song. That's number one. If you're writing lyrics, you don't have to write it overtly. If you want to be clever, get some metaphors on the go. And so I chose as my models was the Small Faces, because I loved the Small Faces. And I loved things like Itchy Coo Park, Friday on My Mind. Oh, loads, Here Come the Nice, because they were perfect pop songs. And they had a perfect structure, which is verse, bridge, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, middle eight, bridge, chorus. 2 choruses and sayonara. And that was the formula I started with. And Neil and his band, The Flies, demoed 3 songs with me. And they were a bit obscure because I had this idea about making a poster and putting it all over London, because I'd seen this thing that was going on all in the tubes at that time. There was this huge picture of a very good-looking guy called Johnny Cougar. That was before he became John Mellencamp Cougar, or Cougar, Mellencamp, I don't know which way around. But anyway, and he was more or less a model. I didn't even know what he did. I just saw his face everywhere. And I thought, what a gorgeous looking guy. Who is he? What does he do anyway? And it wasn't clear. And I thought that was great, that I should note it, and therefore everybody else notes it. So I thought, that's what you do. You make a poster and you slap it up everywhere. So I made a poster, which is when it starts to get obscure. It said, where is Montana Wildhack? And all my mates in the music industry then, like Rusty Egan and Steve New and all that, they said, oh, we saw your poster up over the tubes, but, what is it? Who is Montana Wildhack? I said, that's it. Who is Montana Wildhack? Montana Wildhack was a porn star in a Kurt Vonnegut Jr. story called Slaughterhouse 5. And I loved Slaughterhouse 5, so all my first songs were about Montana Wildhack or Billy Pilgrim, which was the main character. And
But what would be the connection between him and you?
God knows. My brain is nuts. I just thought, that's where I'm coming from. And it was where I was coming from at that time. I don't know.
So you were publicising someone that didn't really exist?
Yes, because I thought, well, they'll see my face and then they'll go, ooh, who is she anyway? And anyway, and if they didn't know who she was, then I didn't want them to know me. Something like that.
I think you'd written a song, or started to write a song, hadn't you? Do you remember what was the first song you wrote? Because anyway, in the book,
okay,
it talks about the explosion which killed somebody.
Yes, and that song never got the airing because it was too... it was a song that I wrote about... there was an explosion in... Berkeley Square. And I'd read in the newspaper that a man had gone to have his sandwiches, to have his lunch break. And he was actually, I think, one of the only victims. And he was dead from just going to have his lunch. And I felt that was so sad and so poignant and so what's going on in our times. Therefore, I'd started to write a song about people trying to make a love connection. You drink your coffee, I sip my tea. And that, will they get off with each other or not? And then the next part of the song was, but at the same time as this is happening, as in babies are being made, people are dying, and a bomb goes off in Berkeley Square. And that was the content of that song originally, which became Will You?
Yeah.
But in those days, it was, the work in progress was that it was an ironic song with both faces, you know, of love and sex and bombs and death. But I never showed it to anyone. And then when Breaking Glass came along in my life and they said, have you got a love song? I said, I've sort of got a love song. And I showed it to them, and that's when Tony Visconti decided, he told me later, that he wanted to produce me.
So let's just spin a little bit, so we'll back a little bit so we get the story of Breaking Glass. So the demos that you had got you a deal at Albion Records, two guys, Derek Savage, Di Davis, and they had 999, Iain Gom, the Stranglers. They had quite an impressive roster at the time.
Yeah.
And you signed with them. You later obviously came to regret that because they tied you to a contract which was quite long term. But you were on reception one day at Albion Records, and you get a phone call.
Okay. I'm on the reception because Albion only gave me £1 for my record deal, which of course was ridiculous, but I didn't know that. I just wanted to be signed. You know, it's like these foolish people you see going, I just want to be a star. Ridiculous. You don't give yourself away that cheaply. But I did. And I didn't have any money. The telephonist had gone on holiday at Albion Records, so I said, can I have the job for 2 weeks while she's on holiday? And my first day of work, lunchtime, everybody had gone out, it was just me. Phone rings. Can we speak to somebody about Hazel O'Connor, singer on your label? I decided it was me. And they said, no, darling, this one's an actress, a singer. No. And I said, no, it's me, I'm answering the phones as well. And so we ended up straightening that out, and I went for an audition at United Artists. And when I was in the place to do the audition, it was pretty horrible because there was loads of really, really well-known people. Toyah came in, and I knew Toyah from, we used to rehearse in her warehouse in South London. And the minute I saw Toyah, I thought, this is stupid, she's an actress, I've seen her. I know what she does, she's known, and I'm just nobody, and I should just leave, which is my picture of myself quite often, of being useless. And I'd actually been, one of the guys at Albion that worked there had taken me to see a faith healer some weeks, months before, I can't remember. And she'd given me a book. She hadn't done any hocus pocus, just gave me a book and said, read this, I think this will be very handy for you. I read it, and it was about...
Bring out the magic in your mind.
Yes, by Al-Quran. And it was about visualization and believing that the universe will bring to you something if you ask for it, and you lay yourself open and you prepare for it. So I started to prepare. I thought I'd do it as an experiment, to be honest. I was just experimenting, going, yeah, of course this works. And then I decided I'm going to do it really with full vigour, and I'm going to imagine that something amazing is coming to me. It's really sticky, it's mad. And I did, and every morning I woke up and I said, something amazing is coming to me. I don't know what it is, but it's just going to change my life. So amazing. And then that phone call happened. And when that happened, it actually quite freaked me out, because I thought, oh no, what's happening? And then the next minute I'm in United Artists, and I'm looking at Toyah just walking in, and other people coming in that I knew from reading about them in the music papers. And I lost my guts, and I thought, I'm just going to run away. And then I stopped myself and said, why do you always do that, girl? And I always do that because I'm afraid of losing or being rejected. And that's why most people do that. This can be something that's just over the horizon, that's yours and belongs to you. And instead of going for it, you go, I'm not sure, I don't think I'm really worthy of it. and I didn't. Just for a second in my life, I stopped myself, checked myself, didn't look at the script because the script was horrible at that time. But I looked at the passage in the book that said, you just have to believe that something is there for you in this life. And I started to imagine things that I would want, you know, and I wanted to, and then it became far-fetched to anybody, you know, hearing this story. I wanted to become the lead of that film. It was usually originally about a man, not a woman. The film was not going to be about a girl lead singer. But I, in my mind, said, no, it's going to be a girl singer. It's going to be a new script. They're going to ask me, obviously, to play the lead. And then the bonus would be they're going to ask me to write the songs because I wanted to get away from Albion. And then when they say, do you want to write the songs, they're going to say, what producer do you want? And I'm going to say Tony Visconti, David Bowie's producer, because I am a big David Bowie fan. And with that inside me, I went into the audition and it was different. I was different for a minute. I was confident and I did the audition, and the next minute they're saying, give her another piece of script, give her the one about the bass player in the band. And I thought, yeah, get them there. And then they said, and you know, where have you been? What's your story? Have you got an equity acting, you know, union card? And I said, yes, actually, I got that when I was a dancer in Beirut in Japan. And they went, yeah, very interesting. You were in Lebanon, yes? And I said, yeah, Civil War started there. And of course, I didn't know in those days, right? But I understand now, marketing and PR and talking. If you've got something to say, you got, you know, your quid's up on somebody that just goes, yeah, no, yeah, no.
They want someone with guts and character to do that.
Yeah, and who's got a story to tell. And I certainly had stories. So the next, as you can tell. And so then they said, you got any songs? And I lied. I said, I've got zillions, loads. And I only had 3 or 4 at that time, which was the song Will You, which I never showed to people, and the 3 songs I demoed with my brother's band, The Flies, and the stuff I'd started to do with Albion. So, yeah. And then it developed into, I got the part. Few months later.
So you got the part, and then how did you write all those songs? There's some great songs in that film.
Isn't that amazing? I'm so excited about that. Wow, I don't know. As a little bon tempo kiddie organy thing, I went to my friend's Nan's house in Port Slade and locked myself away for a week. And I also had to diet at the same time because I was only 8 stone, but I had to be a stone less because film makes you look fat. So I was there dieting on the special Atkinson diet. Ugh, never do that again. Yes, Atkins diet, protein only. And I wouldn't do that now because I'm vegetarian, but in those days I wasn't. I lost me weight. I wrote the songs.
But where did the ideas come from?
Margaret Thatcher, because I disliked the woman so much. I disliked what was happening politically in England. There was loads to write about. And once a person like me gets a platform to say it from, there's no stopping me.
Okay, you got the lyrics, but where'd you get the tunes from?
I don't know, just da-di-da-di-da. And
So they just came to you?
yeah, and because I'm not a musician.
You weren't trained as a musician.
No, but you see, a few years before, a drummer I knew was playing drums one minute, and then the next minute he's playing a song on a piano, and I was mystified. I said, how can you do that? You're a drummer. You know, like everybody's got to just be one thing. And he said, oh, it's easy, Hayes. You just do this. And he showed me the chord of C and how the chords worked. And because I've got some kind of dyslexic OCD condition that I live with, I see things in patterns. And if somebody shows me something in a pattern, and the piano, you know, I played a bit of guitar, but it was really difficult, hurts your fingers and all this. But the piano was something I could see. It was like, you know, 3 black notes, 2 black notes, and all the rest are white. And it's a picture that my hands understood and my brain understood. And it was like a whole world opening up. It was amazing, a wonderful discovery. And then to have something to write for the minute that clicked in, I just wrote. I couldn't stop writing. It was great. But I won't do things if I've got no reason for doing them, because I'm lazy.
But I still find it extraordinary. You had no musical training. You just knew a few chords. Like a lot of us do. We're young. We learn a few chords, and then you were able to write some great songs in a week.
Well, I think it's because I didn't listen to anything else. I just listened to myself. And I was at my friend's Nan's house. She put me up. And so it's just me and Nan and me funny diet, walk down the beach every day in Port Slade, go back and just listen to things and sing tunes and think about things. It was a great moment in my life because I had time and I had a reason. Time and a reason. Time to do it. Reason was where we were at in this country, in England at that time.
So you were given a challenge, you were given opportunity,
Yeah.
and you wanted to take it 100%.
Took it.
Yeah.
Working class opportunist.
Yeah, no, I understand
Yeah.
that. And then the film almost fell apart, and then someone called Dodi Fayed,
Yeah.
who became very famous later,
Yeah,
he took it over.
United Artists had funded the pre-production, and then they were heavily into a film called Heaven's Gate.
Which had terrible reviews, but I really
I
liked
liked
it.
Heaven's Gate, because I
it was
watched it
great.
years later,
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
well, that was the film that stopped Breaking Glass nearly happening.
Okay.
And so the producers lost the backing from United Artists, but by this time they'd got me and they'd got Phil Daniels, they'd cast a whole lot of things, and they'd got demos that I'd now done with Tony Visconti, and they took their little package off to Cannes Film Festival. And at the same time, unbeknownst to us, so this is synchronicity again, magic of the universe, Mohammed Al Fayed had given Dodi £3 million to go and, go shopping at Cannes and see if you can find a project to invest in for their company. So Dodi found Breaking Glass and we found each other and the film started production.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
It was meant to happen.
I guess.
And it was maybe partly because you read that book.
Maybe. I mean, I like to think that. But when I do think that, also, when I did think that in the past, it also became quite a burden because it's scary when you think that those things do happen in life. It's a responsibility. And I think there was points in time when I couldn't live up to that responsibility.
Yeah. But the film came out.
Film came
It was
out.
finished. The soundtrack came out.
Yeah, and I got some awards and things,
Yeah.
which was amazing. I remember going to the BAFTA awards because I was nominated for Best Newcomer Actress and Best Soundtrack. And my other people in the soundtrack, was John Williams and Flash. Queen's.
Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, for the
Sure.
Flash film, yeah. And me, Breaking Glass. And that was enough, just to be nominated. And when I had arrived at the BAFTAs, I bumped into Sting, and I'd known Sting beforehand because I used to see him at my friend's studio recording when he was, still a grumpy teacher, grumpy teacher, recording with the Police early tracks. And he said, "Hello, Hayes." I said, "Hello," gave him a kiss, hug. He says, "I'm one of the people voting for the film soundtracks." He said, "I saw your film, it's brilliant." He said, "I voted for it." He said, "But I don't think the others quite got it." As in the other people, voting. So I thought, well, that's fine, I don't mind. I don't mind losing to, actually it was John Williams that took that award. Yeah. That's just the fact that I was nominated was enough for me. Yeah. And then another one came up. I was told I was got to go to somewhere, I don't know, Savoy or Ritz or something, to go and get an award. I'd actually been awarded an award. So I assumed it was another one of these best newcomer things. And so they wanted a photographer to come to my house that morning. And I'd asked Richard Jobson of the Skids to be my escort. But he'd been out on the tiles all night. He turns up at my house, hungover. I go, "Come on, Jobby, get yourself together. You're my escort today." Photographer arrives to take me picture, as they do, to get it in the papers for that night. And he said, "Oh, I wished I'd known you just lived down here in West Hampstead because you're opposite I don't know what you call it, you know, the person you're twinned with, the other person getting the same award, your male
Counterpart.
there we go, counterpart, is living just up the road in Hampstead. And I said, oh, and who's that? He said, oh, John Hurt. He's got Best Actor. And I said, no, I haven't got Best Actress. I'm Best Newcomer. He says, no, you're Best Actress, 1980. So exciting. That was great. That was like a high point for me.
And one thing we left out was you did meet David Bowie, and he offered to write some songs for Breaking Glass, and you turned him down. He said, no,
Yeah.
my own songs.
It was already written on. Thank you, David. Very
How
kind.
can you turn down David Bowie writing the
How
songs?
do you? Well, because I was a spunky little monkey at that time. I was so excited to meet him. Tony Visconti had said, come in tonight if you want to meet David Bowie. He's recording. And he was recording for the Kenny Everett show. And he was doing an acoustic version of Ground Control to Major Tom. So I go into the studio, we'll watch him recording. There's a woman there called Coco, Corinne, who used to be his assistant and sort of managed him. And she's a little formidable, a bit scary, because I'd heard about her and I thought, she's a really tough woman. Sitting there watching, and he comes out and Tony takes us into his office, says, this is David and it's Hazel, and Hazel's just done a film called Breaking Glass, and we shook hands, and then David said, oh, Breaking Glass, did they name it after my song? That's when I went, no, we actually thought of that title, ourselves. And I didn't go as far as saying, do you have a song called Breaking Glass? And then he said, I could write some songs for you if you want, for the film. And I thought, no. I said, we've already recorded them actually, but thank you. And that was number 2 question. 1, 2. Then number 3 question was, you cut Tony's hair, don't you? Yes. Will you give me a haircut? And I was in 7th heaven. I didn't have hairdressing scissors or anything with me. I just had some really crappy things from the cupboard of the office and dirty tea towels around his neck. And he was so nice. I mean, you imagine putting dirty tea towels around the neck of your hero and then chopping their hair and feeling the skull and go, who is this guy? It was great, it was lovely. And then at the end of all that, he said he was going to come to a gig, which is things I read about in music papers, that so-and-so came to see, some big star comes to see some little, starlet or star in the making. And the fact that he was going to come and see me was like, yes!
And he came to see you supporting Iggy Pop.
Yes, he did. He came to see me playing with Iggy Pop, and not biblically playing with Iggy Pop, by the way. I was supporting Iggy Pop, doing 2 nights, but the first night he didn't turn up, so I thought, it's just what, people, stars, they make all these promises and then they never come. And I lost the plot a bit, and I decided I wasn't going to carry on singing anyway because the audience really hated me. And I was not going to do this again. But I had my 2nd night to play, and that was the time in my career where I decided that I was probably going to stop singing because maybe I was a pastiche.
So it wasn't working live for you then?
Well, I was very, very put off by being told to get off the stage.
Of course.
I was really depressed. I was crying that night when I was putting petrol in my car. But I had this devil be care attitude about the one thing I wanted to do was play the soppy song Will You to an audience, because I'd not done that. And it's a little bit like, not that I've got a beautiful body, but say you had a beautiful body but you never showed it to anybody, or a beautiful heart or a beautiful mind, a beautiful soul. You don't reveal it all, and you don't reveal it because you're scared that you're going to look like an idiot or a softie. And that's how I felt about Will You. I did not want to show anybody it because I felt naked showing it, and I didn't feel I was up to being naked. And at that moment, the 2nd night, I'd said to the band, do you know something? I don't know whether I want to do singing anymore because it's obviously not working. And, they all hate me. And if they're the same like tonight, going, get off, you silly cow, and all this, I'm going to get us all to do Will You so that we can at least do it once in front of an audience. And at that point, they're still going, get off. And I said, okay, Lance, let's do Will You? So I said, this is a slow song. We started to play it. And by the time it got to the sax solo, the whole audience were just kind of embracing each other. And when they used to be able to light lighters, you know, doing all this, lighters in the air, hands in the air. And they were saying, you know, going, we love you. Which was so lovely. And also David had turned up. I looked at him because I didn't know what to do, because usually, you know, the saxo, we've not had a usual, we've never done sax solo before. So I went to the back of the stage, kind of tried to get out of the light, because it was, you know, the time for Wesley McGugan's moment to do his sax solo. And I looked to the wings and there was David. And I went like that.
But what changed in the audience, do you think? What was it?
This is my take on it. I should always be, it's taught me to always be brave.
Yes.
To always, even if you're going to be made a fool of, you know, laughed at. And I think that's a message to the whole world. We should always show that nakedness, because when we do, you connect with humanity in a much deeper level. And I think that's what happened. I think that song connected and connects with people on a much deeper level than even I gave it credit for.
It's about being yourself, really.
Yeah. And showing one's vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think by showing my vulnerability, it's like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. When I showed mine, the audience showed me theirs. And that's kind of the relationship I've had ever since in this music
And was
business.
that generally a turning point in your live performances? Yeah.
Totally. And I've learned so much from it. I mean, I've learned more since about the nakedness of a performer and how to not be afraid in that way.
So talk more about that, how that is for you.
Okay, for example, I lately, you know, in the last 20 years, it's lately, I started to do some acoustic gigs.
Yes.
And I started to do them because actually Herbie Flowers, the bass player, had said to me, Hayes, you should really go and talk about your life in Edinburgh Festival, and you should just do an acoustic set like, what's his face from the Kinks? Had been doing a great show and everybody was loving it. And I said, ooh, that's very scary. Ooh. And then I thought about it, because Herbie always has great ideas and he's always got my best interest at heart. And he does a show like that because he's a talker. He's a Taurus like me. We're both like, oh. So I went away, took this, and then he phoned me again. He said, Hazel, you should come to Edinburgh this year. There's a slot in the same place as I'm playing. Get onto it. I've asked him, you can do it, think about it. Do it. Don't think about it, do it. So I did. I booked the space, and then I got together with the harp player that I work with a lot, Cormac DeBarra, and I said, do you fancy doing this? And we worked a show which was just harp and voice and telling stories and making a big noise, making a small noise. And I realised the strength in taking your clothes off, metaphorically, in front of an audience, completely. Because when you do that, when you're very, very, just two of you, you are absolutely naked. If you make a cock up, you have to own it. And cock ups happen.
Yeah, but the audience will normally be
they'll go with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one time singing I think it was the beginning of Will You, and I went, you drink your... I get a frog in my throat, and all the people are just going, and so I have to own it. And then I say, actually, ladies and gentlemen, I may have to start that again, because that's what we call a gobby, you know. And then they laugh, and then we relax a bit more.
They like the humanness.
Yes, because that's what it is.
And I remember just, sorry to interrupt you, but there's something else that David Bowie taught you or said to you, which I thought was very interesting in the book.
This is what David taught me, because when I saw him again properly, I think it was actually at that gig that he came, you know, to, or maybe it was in the studio because there was some charity thing happening. I can't remember exactly, but it was in that time when I was hugely famous and hugely mobbed, and I was a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights, and I had been used to freedom, and suddenly I wasn't free anymore. I was very constricted by my fame. And I said, oh, David, I don't know what to do. It's really scary. Everybody wants to be my friend. I'm just not very good at it. And he said, you've got to remember this. Every person that's a fan that comes to talk to you, they have read about you and they know things about you. You know nothing about them. And the only way you can even the whole playing field is that you have to engage and you have to find one fact out about them, even if it's what's your name, where do you live, what's your job, anything, engage. And then you even it out, and then it becomes a human interchange.
Yes.
And not like fan, star. And I loved that. I mean, then you have the choice. I mean, say people like David, so blooming famous. We are not worthy. He can, you know, obviously whoever's famous has the choice to, you know, go in secure ways and be behind big tough guys and all that. Whatever they want. Personally, I have found my journey is a lot easier to face it. I used to be scared of crowds because people would be all over me, touching me and pulling me scarf off and do-da-da. But then I decided, if I let that happen to me, it's that, again, not that like, it's like having the V on the forehead. I can't be a victim of it. I have to be in the middle of it. So if there's a mobbing going on, I'll just say, bit of space, human being. And people respect that. They learn to respect it. We all have to learn from each other. And that's the way I deal with it. And I've never been scared of my public ever again.
Yeah. It's interesting. I remember years and years ago having a lunch with Herbie Flowers, because I was a huge Bowie fan as well. And I'd say how much I like Bowie, what brilliant songs. And he said, the thing about David is that he doesn't have all that much confidence in his songwriting. He's always trying to better himself.
Yeah.
And I thought, and that was the relatively early stage of his career. That was Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah.
Time when you look back, he changed his career so much in terms of the music.
Yes, he just kept moving
and
it.
it's like this thing of always trying to better yourself.
Yeah.
And if I look at your career, okay, you're never as famous as David Bowie, but you've survived all those years doing what you love. You've changed a lot. You've written songs for 15 albums. A lot of them have been very different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in your own way. You've taken that as well, haven't you? Always trying to better your songwriting, come up with something new.
Yes, and I want to do that because that's life's challenge. Yeah. It's not just I know that we're talking about music or a career, but it can be applied to every single walk of life. Whatever we do in life, we have to keep moving and growing. Because if we don't, we become stagnant, smelly pools.
Stagnant, smelly pools.
I don't want to be a stagnant, smelly pool, do I? No.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just wondering how much more to cover. In a way, we've only covered the first few years of your career, and you've worked, as I said earlier, for all the time pretty much. I think what was very difficult was for you that you had a legal dispute with Albion Records, and that froze the money from Will You, the other big hits. So actually, a lot of that time you're on the breadline. Yeah,
I was on the I'm still on the breadline. I'm always going to be on the breadline. That's just how it is, because there is this thing in the music industry, which of course I didn't know. If somebody had told me really clearly earlier on, I would have been a bit more astute, I suppose. That those 2 years are the magic 2 years. They're the ones when you make and break deals financially. But I didn't care about money. I just was happy that my record was getting played. So
I understand that too.
Mea culpa. Yeah. And after the business disputes and the fact that I couldn't do live work anymore because people had to be paid and I didn't have money to pay them. When everything went pear-shaped, I was owing about £35,000 and my accountant said, you better go bankrupt. And I thought about the people that I worked with, like my lights man, my sounds man. and what bankruptcy would mean to them. My bankruptcy would mean they wouldn't get paid.
Yes.
And I knew their families, and I thought, I can't do that, I won't do that. So I didn't do that. You know, slowly all my debts were paid, and when I did pay everybody their fees and how it worked, I had, I think, 700 quid left, because I said to my accountant, well, what's left? And he said £700. And I said, right, I'm going to go on holiday to Morocco then. And I went on holiday to Morocco, had a great time, made my first really lifelong friend called Munir, who I used to play chess with every day. I went with my mate Sally, and whilst we were there, it was the best time ever. And we went back to the airport to come home, and there was no plane because Laker had gone bankrupt. And I was stuck there. And my friend cried her eyes out for a minute, and I didn't, because I don't act like that. I react about 2 days after the fact. Eventually we got home, and then I started to deal with what I had to deal with. And it took me on a different course. It took me into jazz, because I wasn't allowed to do big gigs anymore, but I could do some little gigs, which is when I started to work with Claire Hurst of the Bell Stars, who I still work with now. We worked with her and a girl called Nikki Holland, who was part of Fun Boy 3, and then Tears for Fears. So the three of us had a trio in the early 80s, and Island Records were going to do a deal with us, and it was very exciting, and then it all fell through, you know, the way things do. And I got used to getting it, but it didn't matter, because as long as there was a project that I loved doing, really didn't matter, because that was what was important. That was what was important.
Hazel, we have to finish in about 3 or 4 minutes. One of the things that you finished your book with, which is a few years old, but it's still current in many, many ways, is that now you still don't have very much money, but you have a passion for building, and you've been at your house in France, you've been putting an extension on, but you don't have the money, but you're happy most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time.
That's what you say in the book anyway.
I am most of the time. Most of the time happy. I'm about the same as everybody else, really. Actually, no, I'm not very glum often, because I've got really marvellous, wonderful friends that are like family, and I have me dogs. I walk my dogs. I do normal things, and I love building. And you know, I built that place in France from the ground up. Literally had no floor, no nothing. I did everything, and I learned how to do that. And that was another one of those challenge things. I love a challenge, and if somebody sets me a challenge, I'll succeed at it. I won't succeed if I have to set myself the challenge, because I'm too lazy. But the minute a challenge presents itself, I go for it like a mad thing.
And you still work and do gigs?
Big time, yeah. I mean, that's,
You
I'd
still
say...
love that, presumably?
Yeah, if I didn't love it, I wouldn't be able to do it, because it would be too much hassle.
Yeah. You're doing a new album, you were telling me earlier?
Yeah, well, I've done a new album with Cormac de Barre on the harp. That's just
Yes.
a very simple album, but it's something we needed to do, because we haven't done one for about 15 years. And then the girls and I will probably record in the next couple of months, and then we'll see. Then it'll be next year and the next year, until, I suppose, the day I die. I mean, I hate that thought. I do think sometimes I make a joke of it, but it'll probably be like that for me. You know, I'll be singing one day like just Tommy Cooper was going just like that. And, you know, if my death comes to me on the stage singing a song that's making people feel moved, I'll be happy. And that's where I think probably my talent, or whatever comes, is that I do have a talent of moving people, their insides, not in a physical way, but in a heart and soul way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hazel, it's been fascinating. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you.
And thank you, people out there, for watching Cherry Red TV. And I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.